Okay, so we are officially live. Today is our double header for education. Our first session features three of our fabulous expert teachers from Oceanside School District. We have Pat Turk, who is a social studies teacher at Oceanside High School, as well as our student activities coordinator currently. We have Eddie Reisner, who is a social studies teacher also at OMS. And we have Andrea Marzano. She is a elementary school teacher for School 2. So thank you, everybody. And Allison, this is really exciting. We got 5 people on one screen. I don't think we've ever done this before. So this is we're really pushing limits today. So for our viewers out there, don't forget, you can if you have any questions or comments, you can add them to the chat box, and as you add them, we'll see them, and we'll highlight a couple of them when we can. So I see, when people pop in, I like to give them a shout out. Joe Capone, there you are. Thanks for coming back. He's one of our top viewers. He comes every day. He's here. So we're here for people like you, Joe. Okay. So Eddie and Andrea and Pat, we're in our homes. We're not in our offices. So we're going to keep it light, right? So please refer to me as Paul and refer to Allison as Allison and on a first name type basis. And Dr. Z, thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Another supporter. Okay. So why don't we just get started, and why don't we just talk about education as a whole, right? In the sense that, you guys all decided to become educators, right? And before we talk about maybe a little bit how it's your role is a little bit different at the different levels, like why did you go into education and teaching? However you guys want to tackle that.
I believe Leighton first.
Sure. Oh, am I going first?
Yeah, ladies. How about that? Okay.
Okay, so this actually was a second career for me. So I wasn't the person who, as a child, always said that, I'm going to be a teacher when I grow up. So I worked in the financial district for a couple of years, and then just kind of felt that it wasn't fulfilling enough and decided to go back to school, and felt like my heart would be in education. And I never looked back. It was the best move I ever made.
It's great. Eddie?
Sure, do you want to go? I'll go.
Go ahead, Eddie.
All right. So I didn't have a second career, but I had when I first went to college, I actually was a biology major with the thought of potentially being like a pre-med student. And I did it for about a year and realized that it just wasn't for me. Both my parents were in education. I had like the most amazing teachers. I went to all the Oceanside schools, and it just I realized that teaching was what I wanted to do. So I quickly changed paths and switched to the education field.
I went in declared as a psychology major, thinking that was the best route for me and my interests. But as soon as I started taking a couple of classes, I realized that that's not really something that I should be doing as a profession if I want to better the world. So then I realized I could combine my love of education and moving through material and explaining it and translating it and psychology, and became a teacher.
It's great. So you guys have been in this profession for a while each, but what keeps you going? Like, what motivates you to wake up every morning and do new things in the classrooms, right? I mean, times change, technology has come, innovations every day almost. Like, what keeps you motivated to keep trying new things?
I think that, the fact that everything in the education field changes so often. Some people think, oh, it's so easy. You get up, you go to work, you do the same every year, but they really don't know until they're sitting in our seat. That, because of everything changing so quickly, I think that's exciting, that, you can try different things with kids, whether it be through now, of course, technology. And I think that's been an exciting thing, as, I'm in this 26 years. And so I've seen a huge change over the years from the time I started. So I think that makes education very exciting. Kids are different, which also makes it great.
Yeah, I agree. I think like every day is a different day, especially I teach middle school kids, and I've told this story a lot. You never really know what each day is going to start like. You don't know what the middle of the day is going to be like. You don't know what the end of the day is going to be like. I had a student last year who accepted a dare to see if he could fit inside of his locker. And that's how my morning started. and you know, like they don't teach you what to do in college. Like when that happens, what do you do? And I didn't know if I should be angry. I didn't know if I should be like weirdly impressed. But it was just a strange start to a day. And in my 10 years, you know, I think the technology has definitely changed the educational field, for lack of a better phrase. But I really think that teaching kids is the same. It's just like how we're teaching them, it evolves. And so like those interactions, those face-to-face interactions, you know, has really made me appreciate this past 2 weeks not having those face-to-face interactions and sitting at a desk and kind of living the life that I didn't think I was going to want to live, and sitting in front of a computer has really changed my appreciation for the face-to-face interaction with kids in the classroom.
So true. That's so true.
Yeah.
For me, I'd probably have to say that every day is different, and that allows basically a way to connect with everybody at their level. You know, I'm not a building leader or anything like that, but when you can kind of meet people at their level and then kind of move them along, guide them along, that's like some of the best rewards you can get. And I also have the gift of a social studies curriculum that keeps things moving and current. Not every discipline has that, but at the same time, you know, technology has kind of allowed every discipline to be able to kind of change and adapt and do things in new and different ways. So, you know, no classroom is the same as it was 10 years ago, and you can keep saying that going all the way back.
Yeah, I mean, technology is actually really crazy. Think about the circumstance that we're in right now. Imagine this happened 10, 15 years ago. You know, I'm sure we're you know, districts are still trying to figure out what we're doing now, and we have all this tech. Could you imagine if we didn't have all this tech? Right. So it is wild.
Back to students.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about it. So just real quick, Charles, thanks for showing up. You know, another consistent viewer, and our buddy Vincent. Good to see you. Thanks for coming back. And you know, Dr. Zirianis, our English director, she says that I think you three should change levels for a day, right? I mean, that's a pretty interesting recommendation, right? So, well, let's just talk about that for a second, okay? About changing levels. So each of you teach at a different level. Maybe you can describe to the viewers, because some of them might be thinking about going into education, right? And they're thinking, you know, do I want to be an elementary teacher? Do I want to be a middle school teacher? Do I want to be a high school teacher? They don't know. You know, what they remember is what they remember from when they were, well, what they will remember. What they know is the experiences they had as a student, right? But listening to professionals that are doing it for work for X amount of time, you know, maybe you just talk about your environments a little bit, right? You know, what makes your environment specially unique to your level? How about we start with Pat first, because Pat's always been going last.
All right, you got it. So, you know, I knew early on, because of the first class I took in education in college, they made me observe, and they made me observe all the different levels as part of my requirements. So my observation now is I had to do elementary, I had to do middle, and I had to do high school. And probably the best thing anybody can ever do is once you take an ed class, you get in and you observe, and then you try to see if you can work in that environment. Like, is it engaging to you, not just to the kids, but it is engaging to you? Can you develop a passion around creating a working relationship with those kids at that age? And I got to tell you, elementary teachers are like amazing people in my book, and it's just not meant for me. I knew very early on I wouldn't survive kind of in that K-6 environment. Now, this is bad putting this on video, but if you ever transferred me there, I think I'd have to leave. I don't know if I can actually kind of be as engaging and effective as I am in the high school setting. So I'm certified 7 to 12. It just worked out that I ended up in a high school setting early on in my career, and I've stayed there. You know, at any given day, Allison could be like, you know what, I want Turk in my building. And next thing you know, I could be in a classroom next to Eddie.
Come on down.
And over, right? We don't want to say down. I've heard those.
Yeah, over.
But I can't believe, you know, kind of the difference between the kids. And even in the high school, the 9th grade group versus the 12th grade group, it's like they're not even in the same school. And it's amazing kind of how you see that transformation go from year to year and how they develop as people and learners.
I couldn't agree more with
So-
Pat. I'm amazed by elementary teachers constantly. Some of our kids, we have them for 42 minutes, 41 minutes, and it's like, whew, that was a long 41 minutes. I can't imagine for 6 hours a day. It's mind-boggling that you guys can do that, and I applaud elementary teachers constantly. But similar to Pat, I observed a level, elementary, middle, and high school. I was dead set on being a high school teacher. I thought it was what I was going to do. I had no interest in middle school, and then I spoke with the person who was probably like the biggest influence on me as a teacher besides my parents, who was Mr. Keegan, who was also my middle school teacher. And he was like, don't give up on the middle school yet. And, don't give up on that idea. I student taught in the middle school. I student taught in high school. And I couldn't have felt more opposite than what I originally thought my feelings were. I fell in love with middle school. I fell in love with the idea that kids come in as sixth graders when some of their feet don't even touch the floor when they're sitting on their seats at their tables. And then they leave going to high school and they are like young grown adults. And the transformation that they go through in those 2 years is something that I really enjoyed watching. And I really get to see some of them because I do coach up at the high school, and seeing that transition that Mr. Turk talked about, where they kind of go from 9th grade to then 12th grade where they're driving is it's a pretty remarkable transition for them. But I love the enthusiasm that middle school kids bring to the classroom every day. They are very inquisitive still. They're asking a ton of questions, sometimes on topic, most of the times not on topic, just like trying to figure out their world. And I could not envision myself anywhere else besides the middle school now.
Okay. So at first, of course, I have to thank both of you for giving compliments to elementary teachers, because we do work really hard in the elementary. My heart was always with the little kids, even though I had a great advisor in college. And, at that time, the job market wasn't the best. And she had said to me, make sure you make yourself very marketable. So I actually am certified in history 7 through 12. If I wanted to go that route, and elementary, K to 6, and then I have my reading certification. But when I started, my heart was always in elementary, and I've taught in my 26 years of teaching. I've taught first grade, second grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. I am now a reading teacher at school too. So I've kind of seen all the levels, and I've been a classroom teacher and a departmental teacher as well. So it's been a lot of fun. And I think, that experience has brought a lot to now me being a support staff person. So, I think I had a great advisor, and I think she guided me really well as far as, having an avenue to do other things. I never thought I would be using my reading certification. I did feel that I would always be a classroom teacher. And so the opportunity came up a couple of years ago, and I decided to try it out, and that's where I am now. So, you just never know where things lead you. And I think to make yourself very marketable for those kids who are entering into the college field now, I think it's really important. Like, Pat said, he probably would never be able to picture himself in an elementary. And I really never thought I would be sitting in a reading room right now, helping struggling readers. And it's very rewarding.
That's great. Thanks for sharing.
Mr. Gazzone.
Yeah. You call me
just
Paul.
wanted
Now,
to-
we're informal here, Paul.
I know. We're getting
All right, come on.
But I think that's a great point.
Follow the rules.
Just like Andrea was saying, she didn't think that she'd ever be using her, reading license. You never know where you're going to be and where you're, going to go. So it's so important to keep those doors open. And, we've been talking a lot about professions and how do you decide what kind of path you want to go down post high school. Middle school and high school, you also have choices for certain classes. And sometimes a student might say, oh, well, I'm never going to use that, or I'm never, I'm not interested in that. That's not for me. But you have an adult who's telling you as a professional, thought that she wouldn't use a particular certification, but she's not only using it, but really loving it and enjoying it. So I think that's just something we've heard over and over the past couple of weeks, is keeping doors open, and getting certain experiences. One of our speakers said, even if that experience teaches you that's not what you want to do, it's important. He was very thankful for having that experience, for giving him that direction. So when choosing your classes, whether enrichment in the middle school or high school courses, post-high school opportunities, but keeping all of the doors open, because you don't know, right? People change as adults, and what your interest might be professionally might change too. So I think that was interesting. And I didn't know you had all those certifications. That's very impressive.
So
listen, this doesn't mean I want to go 7 through 12. So if any admin is listening right now, besides the two of you,
maybe we'll
nothing you say during this interview will be held against you.
We'll switch it up a little bit.
No.
Before I get to my next question, I just want to say hi to Matt Lee. I didn't say hi yet. Thanks for coming back, Matt. But I do want to kind of build on some of the things that Eddie and Andrea brought up. And this is for our viewers who are potentially looking to go to education. We keep mentioning certification, right? But are you automatically certified as soon as you get out of college with a degree? What does that look like, right? So you go to college, are you automatically certified? Maybe Eddie, you can answer. Can we just explain the path to actually being eligible to apply for a teaching position?
Yeah, so now I think it's changed since I've only been teaching for 10 years, and it's changed dramatically since then. I was lucky enough to have a student teacher last year, so I kind of got a glimpse of what that process looked like currently. But after you graduate, you're doing something called EdTPA. You're filming yourself. You're putting together portfolios. I still think there are certification tests. I know when I was 10 years ago, we had to take I had to take 3 different certification tests in New York State. Yep. So I think it's definitely changed. I think it's becoming a little bit more rigorous. But after you graduate, I think it is when you take the certification tests in order to become a certified teacher. And,
sure.
and I think that some states offer reciprocity now. I'm not totally sure about that, but my undergraduate experience was in Pennsylvania. So I was certified in Pennsylvania and then had to get reciprocity to New York State, in 2009.
Can you just define that term, reciprocity?
Yeah. So states get to determine their own educational, who gets certified, who doesn't get certified. So reciprocity means that if you have a certification in one state, you can then kind of transfer it to a different state. So I was a certified teacher in Pennsylvania, and then had to kind of take another test to prove that I was to get a certification in New York.
Okay, so just to make sure I got it right, so you graduate high school, you go to college, you get your degree. Once you get your degree, you're not certified yet. You have to take maybe some formal exams, like multiple choice tests of some sort. Maybe there's a writing component, but now there's even a portfolio-based assessment too, right? Where you video yourself actually in the classroom, and all that gets submitted to the state. And then after you get your degree, you submit your portfolio, you pass your test. Only then you become certified. Is that accurate?
I think that's the current path, and then every 5 years you have to re-up that now.
That's pretty intense. It's good to know, but it's just to make sure that we have quality teachers out there, right? And Pat, I'm going to ask you this question. So Andrea keeps bringing up, she has multiple certifications in different areas. You brought that up, Ed. I think you have multiple certifications. So, why do you think that's important for a student who might want to go into education to say, you know what, I'm going to get multiple I'm not only going to be a social teacher. I'm going to maybe go get a student's disability license or E&L certificate. Like, why is that important? Do you think it's important?
It's absolutely important. It's important for kind of a variety of reasons, though. When you think about what makes you marketable, right, you got to sit down in front of somebody and you got to be like, hey, listen, you don't know why, but you need me to work here. And that's kind of a hard thing to explain, to somebody when they're just looking at your resume. When I was coming through school, it was special education was the hot ticket. Yep. You had to make sure that you were special education certified. You had to make sure that you took those classes, that you were versed in the strategies. You had to make sure that you could show that you knew what's up when it came to that. Fast forward a couple of years later, it became literacy. and then literacy strategies, and then all sorts of different components that go along with that, from reading and writing and lexile and translating and everything else. And, now you kind of take like a science teacher right now, and they're looking for dual certification science teachers. They're looking for dual certification foreign language teachers. So, as the landscape changes, you go through school and you find out like what's the hot ticket, what's going on, what everybody kind of wants to see. But ultimately, when you sit down in somebody's office and you say, hey, look, I'd like to interview for a job, and this is why you want me, it's an obnoxious strategy to have, but you really need to convey that idea. And you need to say to somebody like, this is why I can add a lot of stuff to this faculty in this building and help the kids who go to school here.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I do agree. I do think there's two perspectives on the multiple certification piece. One is really intrinsic as the educator, that you have a degree in special education or literacy or world language or E&L, and now you're a better teacher, right? Because you have these broad scope of skill sets. But even on a application component perspective, a district that might have two people who go through the interview process that are exactly the same, but now you have that other person has multiple certification on the district end. You could do more legally with that professional because they have those multiple certifications. So I think you guys all brought up a great point about why it's important, and I just really thought it was important to highlight that component.
I think also, just to add to that, I think the multiple certifications you do get, I think you do have to be willing to, and if it were to come to be, like, I'm certified in special education 5 through 9, so I could actually teach at the elementary level, I think, special ed wise. So it's like you have to want to be able to do those things also. Like, it's not just okay just to have that certification, because administrator could be like, hey, like, Mr. Eisen, you're moving to next year, and I would have to, I might not want to, but it's kind of something you once you have that certification, you have the ability to do it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Hence my point of not putting that out there before.
Same.
So before I get to my next question, I just want to say Board of Education member Seth Blau, thanks for coming back. He also been a consistent viewer and participant the last week and a half, so thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask you guys a difficult question here. We're going to switch gears a little bit. I think a lot of times, being in the education profession, they look at the professionals as having a great job. It is a great job. We're so lucky and so fortunate, but I don't think a lot of people understand like what's difficult about the job, right? Because any job that you have out there, whatever occupation you're in, there's always pros and cons, right? So from I want to hear from you who are on the front lines in the classroom with our students, and maybe even dealing with some of the mandates and paperwork pieces that students don't know exist. Like, what's difficult about the job? Whoever wants to go first. I'll go with Andrea.
I think that we wear multiple hats. And I don't think people realize that when we walk into a classroom and we're with a bunch of students that, they bring in academic issues with them, but they bring in a lot of emotional issues with them as well. And so I feel like, I'm a nurse, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, it's like everything in the nutshell. And I think that's very challenging, especially, in the years I've been teaching, I've seen a decline in like parent support. That's very discouraging. I feel like sometimes, educating when I first started out, I feel like was such a huge priority in all of the parents that I've dealt with lives. And I'm seeing a decline in that, and that's upsetting. I know I'm sitting here with a bunch of educators and we don't think this way, but I think that kids bring a lot of baggage into a classroom, and it's been much more so than it's been in the past. And you really have to be, you have to be aware of that. And you have to be able to, handle those situations and be sensitive enough to, and realize that a kid, it may be acting out, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on at home that you may not be aware about. And I think that over the years has been the most difficult part.
Yeah, so you're not only an academic instructor, but you also have to be prepared to work with students who are on an emotional level, right? And that might be something that students and others aren't aware of. It's not just delivering content, right? So what do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that especially in the 10 years that I've been doing this, I've definitely seen that we're competing for their students' attention more now than we did 10 years ago, and it's competing with technology. Like the kids are on TikTok and they're on Instagram and they're on Snapchat and all these other things. And there's 1,000,005 other things they'd rather be doing than sometimes, being in my social studies classroom. And for those 41 minutes, I have to be, on top of my game to keep 100 kids involved, and keep 100 kids engaged when there are other factors of their lives pulling at their attentionality. So that's like definitely a big challenge. I think also, like, when I'm sure this is the same in other professions, but it's kind of as soon as we get comfortable with certain things, whether it's technological, educational stuff that we're using, it changes so rapidly now. So we have to be ready to adapt, not just to changing students, but also just the changing technology that we do have. Even in the last few years, we've totally revamped our technology at the middle school from being, based on one platform. Now we're on a different platform, and now we're, virtually learning. And it's kind of as soon as you do get that comfort, we oftentimes switch, not just for the sake of switching, but because the new things are usually better. And it's kind of, so when we get into that groove, you have to just kind of like be ready to adapt to a different format.
Yeah, that's great, Nert. Constant dealing with change. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Pat?
Yeah, one of the universal things is, you're going to get different bosses, and when you get a different boss and the boss comes in and changes things, you got to kind of try to see what their philosophy is, and you got to try to see how that melds into your personal classroom culture, your building culture, and you try to build a bridge between the two worlds. And that doesn't matter what job you have, you're going to have that type of difficulty. But in terms of the challenge in education is making sure that you're actually able to kind of take your lessons and be able to kind of flip and change them so that you can do that on the spot. And that only comes from serious amounts of prep and ability to be flexible in the moment sometimes, because everybody could tell you, and I think at every level, you can make the best plans in the world and you can have the best ideas in the world. And before you go into a room, your supervisor can be like, this is a great idea. This is wonderful. And then you go into the room and it's just bombing. It's just bombing. And then now you got to be able to kind of flip and move on the spot. And if you didn't prep, you're not really going to be able to kind of handle that situation. And your lesson's going to be over about 10, 15 minutes before the bell rings, and you're all going to be staring at each other.
Can I, Mr. Paul, I know we're wrapping up soon. And that's a really important skill, Pat, to just be able to kind of think on your feet and not panic and figure out what you're going to do, if something's not going as you planned. What other skills do you think you possess that you kind of knew were strengths of yours when you were in middle school or high school or college that you think are highlighted in the teaching profession? Like, what characteristics do you possess? What type of skills do you possess that you've kind of have always felt were a strength of yours that you've honed over the years that contribute to your success as an educator?
Sure. Who wants to go first?
You want me to go? I'll go.
Go ahead, Pat. I'll pick
right.
my friend over here, Eddie. Mr. Eisen. Go ahead.
So I think that being personable, not just with your colleagues but also with your kids, it really makes a difference. If kids know that you care about them, if kids want to be with you, to me, I think that's the easiest way to get kids to buy into your shtick, to buy into your curriculum, to buy into, what I'm asking them to do, what I'm asking them to learn. And it's not just with the kids. I think if your colleagues, like being with you, if they like working with you, I think that being open and personable with everybody in your workspace, I think that's probably across the board in all professions, really. It's really beneficial in the teaching world.
I would agree. That's definitely one of your many strengths. But you
Thank you.
Bring to the table. Kids and
I agree, Ed.
It's true. The kids and your colleagues, I think, would agree that you are very personable, very caring. And I think that everybody senses that. Thanks.
Thank you. You too.
Definitely think that's a huge quality. And humor, I bring a lot of humor to my class, like when kids get my humor and we're laughing together, it's just a great connection. So I think, humor and being sociable like that and personal is really an important quality.
We love humor at the middle school, Andrea. Middle school humor is very important. Building your resume.
The recruiting has begun.
I know, Pat, you're not funny and you're not good. You don't want to come to it.
Most people would describe me as pretty boring and vanilla.
So
I would say though, to Allison's question, that the best thing that I think I worked in restaurants in college, just trying to scrap some money together, and I worked with somebody who actually they didn't have to. They could have sat behind a desk and just told other people what to do. And this person actually went in and did every job. I watched them be a prep chef, a head chef. I watched them be a busboy. I watched them kind of, clean and do all the dirtiest jobs and then do every other job while I was just trying to be a waiter, just one job. And this was my boss. And I was so impressed that he not only did the job of everyone else, but then when he spoke to people about what he wanted and what he, didn't want done, everybody knew that he knew what was going on. He knew what was talking about. So it was so impressive to me that I know now going into the classroom, I was personable and that's important, but you also had to show that you couldn't just say, I know how it is for you. You could show how it is.
Like putting yourself, that's a really good point. We talk about that a lot in the middle school, like putting yourself in the shoes of that middle school student who you're asking to do however much homework or to get up in front of the class, but being able to put yourself in all of the different shoes because everybody's are very different. That's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that.
So let me ask you guys a question. So think back to when you guys were in school, middle school, high school, and some of the opportunities that were available to you.
Can you remember that far back?
What sticks with you as far as like being really helpful, whether it be an activity, a club that you were in, maybe a course that you took either at the middle school level or the high school level, maybe an experience at the elementary, middle school, right? Like what is something you remember from your K12 experience that you think helped prepare you or guide you into the profession where you're in? Like, what should students be taking advantage of?
Well, I'll say my experiences, like my classroom experiences, my classroom memories. I don't often think about lessons that the teachers gave me or anything else like that until I'm in the room, and then I'm able to apply that prior knowledge. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I actually know this, and I get that sense of confidence, and that feels good. But those aren't the memories that I carry with me on a day-to-day, and they're not the things that make me, get phone calls from friends or have me pick up the phone. It's from elementary, just doing like a little club thing or a little activity, in middle school and sports. They were kind of paramount to my entire childhood, and clubs. I ran the biggest clubs in college because I did all those things, prior to it. Like, my college was right near yours, Paul, and we always talked about what campus life was like and, whether we had a better one or you had a better one and all that fun stuff. And it was never about the teachers. It was always about, no, check out what my campus did for this club and for this thing. And this is why kids wanted to do it. And this is why there's a strong alumni network.
Where'd you go to school, Pat?
Siena.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And Pat, it's actually pretty funny that you say that because that kind of foreshadowed your position of student activities coordinator for the last 6 years, right?
Yeah.
So that is, see how that ties together right there. Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, I think my wife always makes fun of me because I remember all of my teachers from first grade. It's like a weird connection that I have. And she's like, I don't remember like 5 of her teachers, but I can literally rattle off all of the teachers I had through elementary school, middle school, and high school because I was able to develop such strong connections with them. I feel like my teachers were always available to me. And I think that students and teachers really need to really, take advantage of the opportunities that we have to make an impact on kids, and for the kids to take advantage of that to kind of let us, guide them in their travels and what they want to do in their lives, and I was fortunate enough to have teachers that, weren't just teachers, but became mentors and friends and eventually colleagues who kind of guided me along the way. And I would tell any kid to do as many things as you can to be involved in school and from an early age. I like Pat said, I played sports my entire life, and it was kind of like my home base was sports. But I really think that the foundation that teachers gave me and the relationships that I was able to develop with them is one of the reasons why I feel like I'm trying to create strong relationships with my students now as a teacher.
Good.
So I had a fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Panterson, and I have to tell you, she probably was my biggest inspiration. So she just had, looking back at her now, I think about the kind of work ethic she had and how devoted she was to us. And we hatched duck eggs, and I'll never forget this as a child. And we got to, over the Easter break, bring the ducks home with us. And so when I became a teacher in the primary grades, I purchased duck eggs, and every year I would hatch ducks in my room, and the kids would actually see them come out of the shell. And I had them always running around my room at times, and it was really adorable. And years later, I ran into a parent, and her son was, in college already. And she said to me, you made such an impact on my child and myself. And she pulled out of her wallet a picture of her son holding one of the ducks. And I couldn't believe that she had this in her wallet after all these years. And I thought, oh gosh, this is like me never stopping to think about Mrs. Panterson, my fourth grade teacher, who just left a mark on me and then made me feel like, gosh, I hope I can leave marks with other kids.
Right.
So
I remember that I did that in kindergarten in Miss Fisher's class with the incubator. And I remember it so vividly every day, checking the calendar, waiting to see, because they were expected to hatch on a certain date. I don't know. We'll have to ask Mr. Christensen if that's still legal. But I
had a Miss Fisher in kindergarten also.
Don Maresca used to come in on the weekends and turn the eggs for us.
Oh. That's funny. I remember
dedication and commitment right there.
Thank you, everyone.
But
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're about to end our first session of the doubleheader of education. But before we go, I just want to say thank you to Pat and Eddie and Andrew, not only for being on the show, but just for the work that you guys do every single day. When you think about it, everyone that we've had on in the past was influenced by a teacher. Right. So it all starts with what goes on in the classroom and at the elementary level, middle level, and at the high school level. And because that's really the foundation of where students grow their curiosity and ambitions and develop their career path. So for that, we thank you. And again, thank you for being on here.
Thank you.
And what we're going to do right now,
Thank you very
I've never
much.
done this before. So
you.
I'm going to, Eddie and Andrea and Pat, you guys are going to go. And as you go, I'm going to bring in Dr. Harrington. So this is going to be your first. There is.
Hey guys.
Okay, safe everybody.
Can I say something? Can I say something to Miss Marzano? Miss Marzano, your tenure is good.
Yes.
Oh, we lost her.
It's all right.
Well, you could let her know. I feel so badly. She's one of the few teachers up for tenure this year. And I don't know what's happened with all that, but I want to make sure you know that tenure's good.
That's great.
All right.
Let me leave this meeting and then I'll come sit with you. All right. Enjoy your day, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Great work, guys.
Okay. So, Dr. Harrington, how are you? So, Dr. Harrington, before we get started, I'd like to kind of highlight some of our new participants. So, Matthew, thanks for joining us. Herb, good to see you. Thanks for coming back. And Miss Cilio, thanks for being part of this, okay? So just so you know, Dr. Harrington, as we have these conversations, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a comment box. So you might see some comments that come up from our viewers. They might ask some questions. We might highlight some. We might give some shout-outs, We kind of like to keep it nice and relaxed and a little bit fun in here. We're not in our offices, we're in our homes. So, that's kind of how we roll around here. Also, I'm probably just going to call you Dr. Harrington all the time just because it's kind of ingrained in my mind. But, we try to keep it like Paul, Allison, and then I'll probably stick to Dr. Harrington because I probably can get that out of my mind. Yep. All right. So this is interesting because we had some teachers on and when you think of education, teachers are essentially the entry point of the field of education, right? You could enter as a substitute teacher, right? But when you think about full-time employment, you think of teachers as the first level of education, and there are a lot of different positions as you move up in the field, right? So you could go from being a teacher to being maybe a chairperson or a curriculum coordinator or director, assistant principal, assistant superintendent of curriculum, maybe an executive director, and then so at the very top is the superintendent, right? And so when you think about the economy of what we have right now is, we have essentially the teachers at the beginning point of the profession, and then it doesn't really go much higher than a superintendent. And so can you just start off by talking to us about your path to how you got to where we are right now?
Right.
Where you are right now?
Sure. I'm happy to do that. My path is pretty typical in terms of going up the ladder somewhat, rung by rung by rung. But I also had some opportunities very early in my teaching career because I was a speech pathologist at a time when people did not know even what that was. So I was very quickly moved into, after that role, an administrative position relative to special education because the laws around special ed were first becoming a reality for school districts. And ironically, the place where I made that first shift was actually in the Oceanside School District, now going on well over 30 years ago. I hate to even think about that, but that's actually what happened to me. I got a position in Oceanside. They knew they needed some help with administration in terms of special ed, and I was right time, right place. And my background was an asset at that point. But from there, I wound up having a K12 director's position very early on in my career. The good news about that is it gave me a K12 perspective, which certainly has been an asset for me beyond that. But from there, I also realized that a couple of things. One, it was too early in my career to be so pegged into just the special ed world. But I also wanted to be a building principal. That to me was the best job in the whole world. And I was looking for that. I put myself out there for interviewing a variety of different positions. I honestly had to take an assistant principalship because I was not, even though I had been a K12 director, special ed, there were a lot of questions that I could only do special ed. So I took an assistant principal's position, knowing it was going to lead me to a principalship, and it did a couple of quick years after that. When I became an elementary principal in the Lawrence School District, which is where I went to school and graduated, I thought I would never, ever, ever leave that district. First, because of the nature of the job, which I loved. And I'm sure Dr. Glickman-Rogers can attest to that. There's really still no better job than a building principal, in my opinion. But I also was so fond of the Lawrence School District because it was, again, my home district. I was tapped on the shoulder by my superintendent at that time, and he said, "No, you're ready to do more." And he focused me into a position which was life-altering for me in the K12 Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in the Oyster Bay District, which was a small district. I was there 15 years, which is a pretty long time in the trajectory of administration. 9 years as their superintendent, and then my true dream of a lifetime came to pass when I had an opportunity to come back to Oceanside. And what I'm looking at as ultimately, I'm pretty much assuming will be where I'll ultimately end my career. It's also where I started my career. So I went pretty much full circle, but very, very, very much up the step by step. One of the things we're encouraging young administrators now, young teachers, and especially females, I have to say, is to not look at the movement as a ladder as much as a jungle gym. where you can kind of go sideways and upwards and down and to go back up, because they're rather than lock yourself into that step-by-step trajectory. So that's my story.
Oh, that's so interesting. I like that, jungle gym type analogy. It's pretty interesting. So I think when the students hear of superintendents, they see their faces. I don't know if they know what actually a superintendent does, right? So I'm going to ask that question for the students and for our viewers. What is the typical day of a superintendent?
So, well, if
you
ask my mother, all she thinks I do is go to meetings, because no matter when she calls me, no matter what time of day, I'm in a meeting, according to her. So I think she literally thinks I sit there and just wait for these meetings to happen. Paul, that's a really hard question to answer, because every day is different. And it's also what makes the work so exciting. I will tell you, I think I plan my week very similar to the way a teacher lesson plans for the week. And I do that with the best of intentions. I try to be sure that there are certain things that are embedded in that week, such as visiting schools, visiting classrooms. It's still my most favorite thing to do. But there are some follow-up conversations, if you want to call them meetings, that are regularly scheduled, and some that I are planned. But I do try to look at a week as a lesson plan for the week, and working primarily also a big part of the superintendent's job, not only to work with their team, their leadership team, their teachers, multiple unions like the clerical union and the custodial union. There are a lot of different people that wear different hats and have different needs and wants. But a big part of the superintendent's role is to work with the Board of Education, because technically the only person the Board of Education hires is the superintendent. It's the only person they can hire from their own recommendations. Every other person. And if you follow the board agendas, the language is really clear. Those people are hired at the recommendation of the superintendent. So working with a board, is a huge component of the superintendent's role that honestly, you don't know what that's like until you're actually in the biggest learning curve for new superintendents. And we try to mentor them through that. But every board is different, every personality is different, every culture is different. So it's not an easy one size fits all either, but it is a huge part of the job. And the superintendents who don't recognize that or don't do a good job at managing their board, and that sounds harsher than I mean it, but if they don't know how to do that, they generally are not successful.
So, Dr. H, we had asked the teachers what kind of skills, characteristics do they think they possess and have honed in on over the years that have allowed them to be successful educators. And they shared things like being kind and caring, compassionate, humorous, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So now, going from a teacher to an administrator, what kind of skills, characteristics do you think a teacher might have? What kind of strengths do you think they might have that you would recognize that would allow them to be a successful administrator? So what skills, in addition to those that a teacher would need to be successful, does an administrator need?
So that's a great question. So I'm going to look at it two ways. One is about the management. And the reality is that you are juggling multiple balls in the air at the same time. So if there's one thing I have learned, and I am incredibly grateful that I have this skill set, you need to be organized. If you're not able to literally just being able to go from step A to step B and keep all those balls in the air at the same time, you're not going to be successful. So I'm not necessarily saying you have to be super type A personality, but I have to be honest with you, those that don't have that skill set, again, they wind up failing because you just need to keep that many things on track at the same time. So from that perspective, that's the number one skill that you look for. A little bit hard to tell whether people have that skill or not, to be honest with you, during an interview process. So I try to find as many creative ways as I can to see if I can get to the heart of that in someone's ability. But that is key. Second from that, many people have this skill, but it is so crucial that for a leader, it not at all be about them. It really has to be about your team and about being willing to recognize that you can't do it alone. You shouldn't do it alone. And it has to be about everything and anything but you. Right. And I do think that's a skill set that you can weed out when you're looking for those new leaders. Many teachers have that because just by the nature of their role, and how they manage their classroom. But reality is some people still make it about themselves. And that doesn't work, in my opinion, for a successful leader.
I could see that. I thinking about the middle school with Mr. Trump, Ms. Strandy, myself, we all have different strengths and we rely on each other's strengths. So I could appreciate that, working together as a team and appreciating what other people, Mr. Trump, there are things that he might be better at than I am. And, being comfortable with that and okay with that. Working together.
Again, I'm not trying to compare, but I do know a lot of superintendents, and I'm involved at the state level too. So I meet people across our state. I worry about those who feel that they're the only ones who do X, Y, or Z, and are really afraid to release any control. And it's just, to me, A, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And B, it's just, to me, not the way you can lead. And God knows we can look at the current situation we're in. And, if it all had to rest on my shoulders, and if I thought I was the only one who could be making decisions or doing things, we could not be existing the way we're existing right now.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay. Just to be consistent with our viewers, I just want to give a quick shout out to our Board of Education, Michael D'Ambrosio, for showing up. Thanks,
I hope he wasn't on there when I was saying all those terrible things.
Just to keep, follow up with the interview piece and skills piece, right? You talked about the skills that you think it takes to be successful, from being a teacher to administrator. But, a lot of our viewers who are watching now, or, we have a lot of viewers that watch the videos later, their first job will be a teacher, right? So as a superintendent, right, I believe you have the hiring ability over teachers. So hiring ability for teachers. And so what skills do you believe that our students who are going into the education field, what do they need to develop and be able to kind of strengthen and put on display to really attain a teaching job, because it's a competitive field, but also be successful?
Great question. So some people have heard me say this many, many times before, so I apologize in advance. But the bottom line is I am a firm believer that teaching is incredibly hard work, and that it's a highly intellectual activity. So one of the first things I look for in a candidate is, how smart are they, or how smart are they in their ability to know what they know, and their ability to be able to, compensate for what they don't know. I mean, in that situation. So to do the work, and there's so much that we know that goes into planning a lesson, executing a lesson, creating appropriate feedback for their learners. I could go on and on and on. I know that's for a topic for another day. But the bottom line is, it's also it takes a lot of intelligence to figure out all of those pieces. But at the same time, you want someone who obviously is compassionate and cares about kids. I've gone through some interviews with prospective teachers, and they never mention children or students or kids once in the entire conversation. More often than not, those people, get wiped off my list. So it's got to be about the learner. And I am so grateful knowing that I have a team of people in Oceanside who help make decisions about potential candidates or people to come into our Oceanside family. And we're all on the same page with that. And as a result, I know we've hired exceptionally wonderful educators. Not everybody makes it. Our standards are incredibly high. And some people just say, you know what, I don't really want to work that hard, and make that decision on their own. But that's few and far between here in Oceanside.
Are there things that you miss about, you've been in administration probably at this point far longer than you were in a classroom or providing services. Are there things that you miss or wish you had, more opportunity for that you just don't as an administrator, as a superintendent?
Well, that's a super great question. This is what I will say. No matter, I set a goal for myself when I went from being a superintendent in a very small district to Oceanside, that I wanted to be the same superintendent in Oceanside that it was in Oyster Bay. The reality is, given the number of people that are in our 10 buildings, I can't say to you that I know everybody's name, and I not only know their name, I know their husband's name, their wife's names, and I know the children's names, or to some extent. I did that in Oyster Bay. I certainly did that as a building principal. I mean, when you're a building principal, you are part of a family. Right. Now, I believe Oceanside in the big way is a family, but I gave up trying to pretend that I can have that same one-to-one relationship. I do really miss that.
Yeah.
With that being said, my husband marvels every now and then, because I live relatively close in the community. I'll be out and about, and there'll be an elementary kid who actually recognizes me and will say hello. It makes my day.
Right.
Everyone's like, wow, I can't believe they know who you are.
Right.
Also, the high school. I walked through that high school. I love that building, and I love walking there in through those halls. And kids will say hello to me. Now I have special relationships with the ones that do my video and all of that.
Right.
But I can actually say I recognize many of the faces.
Right.
And the teachers, I work really hard. I really work really hard at knowing their names and connecting in that regard. But there are still people that I'm like, wait, who is that? Do I know that person? And that breaks my heart. I just don't know how to do that any better. I'm open to suggestions. I try.
I think you're doing a good job, but we're a small city. I worked in, when I first started teaching in Limbrook, I worked in a middle school where I knew every single child's name. Sometimes children walk through the doors, especially because it's middle school and they change so drastically from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. But sometimes I'll look at a kid and say, wait a second, like, do I recognize him or her? So it's different in a small school environment. I could appreciate that. But.
So while you were talking, you said something that kind of caught my attention, and it was that you set a goal for yourself, right? So you were in Oyster Bay and you came to Oceanside, and you envisioned yourself in the same position, doing almost the same things, right? And at some point, you kind of said, you know what, like, I'm not going to be successful if I try to do what I did in Oyster Bay in Oceanside, right? So you had a goal, and I think part of life is kind of going through these moments where you say, look, this is what I wanted to do, but if I keep trying to do that, I'm not going to be successful. So I have to be okay with saying, I got to pivot and shift a little bit. And I guess my question is, like, how did you do that? Like, at what point did you kind of like say, like, you know what, I got to change, I guess I'm trying to do this because it's not going to work. And for me to be successful to run my organization, like, I have to change. And is a skill set in its own right? So can you just talk about that process a little bit?
It's a great point, and it's very hard for me because I tend to be a perfectionist personality. So when I do have that goal for myself, it's very, very hard to release myself from that goal. So, but I think I've had no choice, because you just have to figure out what priorities come at you, and recognize that there will be things that will change your plan. Without getting into too many specifics, this year in general, from the day we opened practically, has been a challenge, and has forced us to change our priorities and our time schedules of getting things done. So you just have to, or else you'll fail at everything. And failing is not an option. So it becomes a matter of being able to say, no, this is my new priority, and the good thing for me is I've got such an amazing team to work off of, and maybe say, look, we might not be able to do this, but can we do that? It's just knowing you have to do it for the benefit of your organization, and your organization is more important than your own personal, need to fulfill a goal.
Do you think there's a degree of humbleness that needs to be present within a person to make that change, right? Because if you're not humble, you may say, "Oh, this is my goal. I'm going to push it through no matter what." What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So let me see if I can say this without in any way trying to minimize any of my other colleagues. And so you started this out by saying, the superintendent technically really is at the top of the organization, obviously below the Board of Ed as the guiding principles there. So that could be a real ego boost for people. And it's an ego trip. And everybody, when you reach that point, you do take a step back and you go, oh my God, I'm the superintendent, now what? But you do have to be a bit humble to walk away from that and realize it's not about you. It's not about your title. It's about your team and so many people that make up that team, similar to like our theme this year, OSD Lead With Me. I've thought a lot about that. We keep changing our theme every year. And this one I think was, so well timed. This whole crisis we're in, this is about leading together. So it is hard, because your ego is stroked when you reach that pinnacle, and to some extent you deserve to be celebrated for that. But at the same time, you have to be humble, or else it's going to go back to being you and you alone. And I just don't think that's the right way to lead.
That's great. So we always like to ask our guests to think back when they were in K12 schooling themselves. Elementary, middle school, high school, right? What experiences do you remember from that time that maybe influenced you into moving into education, or maybe just overall that you just remember and you want to share?
So this was a very long time ago for me, Paul, but I will give it a shot. So honestly, I wanted to be a teacher, I don't know, from as far back as I can remember. And I can remember my third grade teacher in particular, and I wanted to be her, high heels and all. And then I just always had that goal in mind. I will tell you that growing up in the time I did, in the community I did, there wasn't a whole lot of support for me considering going to college and doing anything other than being a stay-at-home. No, let me say it differently. Doing anything professional was not on the radar of the people that would normally perhaps support me through that. But I just was tenacious. I don't know where it came from. I don't. And then fortunately, once I got into positions, I was then supported tremendously by mentors around me, and they're the ones who encouraged me to go further. The only thing I can say about that was I just know I raised my own children with a completely different reference point. They were going to college. One wound up being a teacher. This is her first year in teaching. So can you imagine what she's dealing with? But two very successful kids, but having an education and following through in that was non-negotiable for them from day one. That wasn't exactly the same for me, but I pushed through it.
That's great. So we've been on for about almost a half hour now, so I don't want to take too much of your time. You're really busy, especially right now. We're trying to figure a lot of things out. Before we go, any final remarks you want to share with our viewers about anything that's on your mind, anything, whether it's recommendations or whatever you want to share?
Dr. H, your mom is going to watch this, so this is your big chance. So she knows what you do. So go big.
Right, exactly.
Go ahead.
That's exactly right. Oh my goodness. These last couple of weeks have been incredibly challenging. And I am a pretty level-headed, person, and I kind of go through step by step. But I'm not going to lie that there was a point a week and a half ago when I really thought I was going to lose it, because every day the circumstances were changing, and you wanted to get people's input, you wanted to communicate to people as quickly as you could, you wanted to make the right decision for your community. There was a point where I really got to the point where I said, "Oh my God, can I really do this? And do I want to do this?" But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you take a step back from that, you breathe, and then you realize that there really is no better role than an educator and an educational leader, as we all are. And I would strongly encourage any young person interested in any kind of a leadership role, that thinking outside the box. For those that are business students, the role of assistant superintendent for business, best job around. You can get a job anywhere. Would love to have students shadow Mr. Coakley, and see what that world is like. But it is the best job in the world, and I have no regrets whatsoever, and grateful actually to the people that have given me this opportunity, especially here in Oceanside.
Good, thank you so much. And with that, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we'll just give our viewers a heads up for what's coming. So tomorrow we have Rob Bennett and James McAnufo from their video game designers from Pixel Press and Bloxels. Then on Monday, we have 4th District Council member Anthony D'Esposito coming on. And then on Tuesday, we have prosthetist Robert Schulman from the Limcon Foundation, who's been working a lot with our Project Extra. So we're excited for what's to come. Dr. Harrington, thank you again, and thank you for everyone who came on. Allison, you're on mute. You're on mute, Allison.
Sorry, guys. Mr. Herron, one of our middle school math teachers, who also he leads our coding club at the middle school. He's going to be a co-host tomorrow. So
wonderful.
All the students that participate in the coding club, and some of Mr. Herron's math students, anyone else who's interested, I think tomorrow the middle school students will really enjoy our speakers. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. The Zone, you're the best.
Bye-bye.
Glickman Rogers, have a great afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.